The Calvarian ship appeared above Earth without warning. It was massive, gleaming silver in the sunlight, and shaped like a crescent moon. Every government on the planet went into panic mode. Satellites tracked it. Military jets scrambled. People flooded the streets, pointing at the sky. Inside the ship, Ambassador Velroth prepared himself for another routine integration. He had done this hundreds of times before. New species always reacted the same way. First came fear, then curiosity, then grateful acceptance of the Empire's protection. It was a pattern as old as the Calvarian Empire itself. He sent a message to Earth's leaders, requesting a meeting. Within hours, he received coordinates for a location in Geneva, Switzerland. The humans were at least organized enough to have a unified response. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the conference room, watching the alien shuttle descend from the orbiting mothership. He wore his military uniform, every metal polished, every crease sharp. Beside him stood Lieutenant Lisa Crawford, her posture relaxed but alert. Both of them were armed, which had caused quite a debate among the diplomatic staff. The head diplomat, Ambassador Helen Price, had argued against weapons. Jake had simply asked her what she would do if the aliens decided talking was optional. She had reluctantly agreed to let them carry sidearms, as long as they kept them holstered. The Calvarian delegation entered the building surrounded by floating drone-like devices that hummed with energy. Velroth was tall, covered in iridescent feathers that shifted colors in the light. He had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his face, and his mouth was a small beak that clicked when he spoke. His translator device turned his words into perfect English. "Greetings, people of Earth," Velroth began, spreading his arms wide. "I am Ambassador Velroth of the Calvarian Empire. We have watched your species with great interest. You have achieved basic space travel and nuclear technology. This qualifies you for integration into the galactic community." Helen smiled politely. "We appreciate your interest, Ambassador. We have many questions about life beyond our planet." "Of course," Velroth replied, his feathers ruffling with what might have been pleasure. "The galaxy is vast and contains wonders beyond your imagination. The Calvarian Empire maintains order across this entire sector. We protect over 400 species from chaos and conflict." "That's quite impressive," Helen said. "How exactly does this protection work?" Velroth activated a holographic display showing star systems connected by glowing lines. "Each member species contributes to the greater good. You will provide resources based on your planet's capabilities. Mining materials, agricultural products, manufactured goods. In return, we provide advanced technology, access to trade routes, and military protection." Jake's jaw tightened. Lisa noticed and gave him a warning look. They had been briefed to stay quiet, unless needed. "And if we choose not to participate?" Helen asked, her voice still friendly, but with an edge to it. Velroth's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of confusion. "Choose?" "I apologize if I was unclear. This is not an offer you can decline. Integration is mandatory for all species that reach your level of development. It ensures galactic stability." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Helen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Ambassador Velroth, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. Earth is a sovereign planet. We make our own decisions about our future. Sovereignty is a primitive concept," Velroth explained patiently, as if speaking to a child. "Individual planets cannot survive in the larger galactic context. You need guidance, structure, protection from threats you cannot yet imagine." Jake stepped forward before he could stop himself. "We've been surviving just fine for thousands of years." Velroth turned his attention to the human commander. "You have been surviving in isolation. That time is over. You have 30 of your days to prepare your planet for integration. We will return with administrative personnel to begin the transition." "And if we refuse?" Jake asked. The alien's feathers flattened against his body, a clear sign of aggression. "Then, we will be forced to implement integration through less pleasant means. The Empire has subjugated species far more advanced than yours. Your primitive weapons and simple spacecraft would pose no challenge to our forces. Lisa's hand moved slightly closer to her sidearm. Jake noticed and gave a slight shake of his head. Not yet. Helen stood up slowly, drawing everyone's attention. Ambassador Velroth, I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're giving us 30 days to surrender our independence, or you'll attack us. Those are harsh terms, Velroth said, but essentially correct. The Empire cannot allow rogue species to threaten galactic order. You will join willingly, or you will join by force. The choice is yours. Helen looked at Jake, then at Lisa, then back at the alien ambassador. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. Then, I'm afraid we have nothing more to discuss. You've made your position clear, and I'll make ours equally clear. Earth will not surrender. Not in 30 days, not ever. If you want a war, you'll get one. Velroth's feathers stood on end in shock. You cannot be serious. Do you have any idea what you're challenging? Our military might is beyond your comprehension. Maybe, Jake said, stepping up beside Helen. But we're human. We don't surrender. We don't bow. We don't break. If you think we're going to hand over our freedom because you showed up with a big ship and made threats, you don't know anything about us. The alien ambassador stared at them for a long moment. You are making a terrible mistake. That's our mistake to make, Helen replied. You have your answer. Ambassador, I suggest you leave. Velroth gathered his delegation and swept from the room, his floating drones following him like angry insects. The humans waited in silence until the shuttle lifted off and returned to the orbiting ship. As soon as the aliens were gone, Helen collapsed into a chair. Tell me we can actually fight them. Jake exchanged a look with Lisa. We've been preparing for this scenario for 15 years, ever since we picked up their first transmissions. Every shipyard, every military base, every defensive position has been built with alien invasion in mind. Can we win? Helen asked. Depends on your definition of winning, Lisa said. Can we beat them in a straight fight? Probably not. Can we make them regret starting a fight? Absolutely. Jake pulled out his phone and made a call. Admiral Richards? It's Jake. The aliens just declared war. We have 30 days. Activate Operation Prometheus. Across the planet, military bases received encrypted messages. Shipyards that had been disguised as civilian projects roared to life. Soldiers reported to their units. Civilians were briefed on emergency procedures. The entire human race mobilized for war. In orbit, the Calvarian ship watched and recorded. Velroth sent his report back to the Empire, confident that the High Council would approve immediate military action. These humans would learn their place soon enough. Korvan couldn't sleep. The data kept running through his mind, each fact more alarming than the last. He sat in his small quarters aboard the Calvarian flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing information about Earth and its dominant species. He started with the basics. Earth's gravity measured 1.2 times the galactic standard. That meant humans had evolved under crushing weight that would exhaust most species within hours. Their bones were denser, their muscles stronger, their cardiovascular systems built to pump blood against constant resistance. The atmospheric composition was even worse, 21% oxygen. Korvan shuddered at the thought. Oxygen was a corrosive element, highly reactive and dangerous in high concentrations. Most civilized species breathed gentle mixtures with less than 5% oxygen. Humans lived and breathed in an atmosphere that would literally burn the lungs of half the council species. He pulled up medical scans from the embassy meeting. Human blood used iron-based hemoglobin to carry oxygen. Iron, a metal that rusted and corroded. They had evolved to use one of the most reactive elements in existence as the basis for their life support system. Their blood would be toxic to most species, but the real horror was in Earth's environmental data. Korvan watched video footage of something humans called a hurricane. winds moving at speeds that would tear apart most buildings on civilized worlds, lightning strikes that contained more energy than Calvarian portable weapons, rain falling so hard it reduced visibility to near zero. And humans just lived through these events. They had warning systems, certainly, but their solution was to build stronger structures and wait it out. Some humans even studied these storms for recreational purposes. He found footage of something called a tornado, a rotating column of air that destroyed everything in its path. The video showed human structures reduced to splinters, vehicles thrown like toys, entire communities devastated. And yet, humans rebuilt in the same locations, knowing it would happen again. Corvan moved on to biological data. Earth's ecosystem was a nightmare of competition and predation. He watched videos of creatures called grizzly bears, massive animals weighing over 300 kilograms with claws that could tear through metal. Humans encountered these creatures in wilderness areas and considered it a normal risk. There were sharks with multiple rows of teeth, designed for nothing but killing and eating. There were snakes that could kill with venom. There were tiny insects that spread diseases capable of killing millions. There were microscopic organisms that humans couldn't even see but that caused constant biological warfare inside their bodies. And humans had evolved alongside all of these threats. They had competed with them, fought them, learned to hunt them. Some humans kept dangerous predators as pets. The concept made Corvan's feathers stand on end. He pulled up human evolutionary history. 6 mass extinction events. 6 times when most life on Earth had been destroyed by asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, or other catastrophes. 6 times when nearly every species had been wiped out, and humanity's ancestors had survived all 6. They had adapted, evolved, changed, and persisted through conditions that would have ended most civilizations before they began. But the worst information was in human cultural records. Corvan accessed their historical databases, which they had helpfully provided during the embassy meeting. He started reading about human warfare and couldn't stop. 16,000 documented wars, 16,000 separate conflicts where humans had fought and killed each other over territory, resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes for reasons that made no sense to outside observers. They had weapons ranging from sharpened stones to nuclear bombs capable of destroying entire cities. The nuclear weapons particularly disturbed Corvan. Humans had developed the capacity to make their own planet uninhabitable. They had built enough weapons to destroy their civilization dozens of times over, and they had come within minutes of using them on multiple occasions. But they hadn't. Somehow, despite their aggression and capacity for violence, humans had always pulled back from total annihilation. They had learned to channel their destructive capabilities into deterrence and defense. Corvan read about human military tactics and felt his fear growing. Humans didn't fight in neat formations like civilized species. They used ambushes, guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, and strategies designed to maximize enemy casualties while minimizing their own. They studied war like other species studied art. He found a human phrase that summed up their approach to conflict. All warfare is based on deception. They didn't believe in fair fights. They believed in winning, whatever it took. Corvan compiled all his data into a comprehensive report. He flagged it as urgent and sent it to Ambassador Velroth, to the fleet commander, and to the High Council itself. Surely once they saw this information, they would reconsider their approach to Earth. The response from Velroth came within the hour. Your report has been noted. However, the decision has been made. A conquest fleet is being assembled. We have dealt with aggressive species before. The humans will learn their place. Corvan tried to send additional information, more urgent warnings. But Velroth blocked his communications. The ambassador had made up his mind. Meanwhile, Fleet Commander Zal Thorn reviewed the same data, with very different conclusions. He stood in the tactical center of his flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions and combat simulations. 300 ships, he said to his tactical officer. Against a species that has barely left their home system. This should be simple. His tactical officer, a veteran of 20 campaigns, looked less certain. Commander, the intelligence reports suggest caution. These humans may be more dangerous than standard primitives. Every species thinks they're dangerous, Zalthorn replied. What matters is capability, not attitude. They have 60 spacecraft, most of them designed for system patrol rather than military engagement. We have 300 warships with shields, energy weapons, and 3 centuries of military doctrine. The mathematics are clear. What Zalthorn didn't understand was that mathematics changed when one side refused to follow the expected rules. The Calvarian military had spent centuries fighting species that valued survival and rationality. They had never encountered a species that valued victory more than safety. Back on Earth, Admiral Patricia Richards stood in a command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Holographic displays showed every military asset humanity possessed. It wasn't impressive by Calvarian standards, but it was everything they had. Jake Morrison and Lisa Crawford stood beside her, reviewing tactical plans they had developed over years of preparation. They have better shields, Jake acknowledged. Better energy weapons. More ships. On paper, we're outgunned in every category. And yet you're smiling, Admiral Richards observed. Because they've never fought anyone like us, Jake replied. Look at their battle doctrine. Formation flying. Coordinated volleys. Overwhelming firepower at range. It's structured, predictable, designed for fighting other rational actors. And we're not rational? Lisa asked, with a slight smile. We're human, Jake said. We fight dirty. We take risks. We use the environment. We adapt. Every battle we've ever fought, we've been the underdog. We've learned to turn disadvantages into advantages. Admiral Richards pulled up a tactical simulation. The Calvarians will enter the solar system at one of 3 points. We can't defend all of them simultaneously. We don't need to defend, Jake said. We need to attack. They'll expect us to form defensive positions around Earth. Instead, we'll be waiting at their entry points. We'll hit them before they know we're there. They'll have superior sensors, one of the tactical officers objected. Only if we're broadcasting, Lisa countered. We run cold, passive sensors only, hidden behind planets and asteroids. We let them come to us, then we strike from ambush. Admiral Richards studied the plan. It was risky, aggressive, and completely unlike standard military doctrine. It was also probably their only chance. How many casualties are we expecting? She asked quietly. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. High, Jake admitted. This isn't going to be clean. But if we don't stop them here, if we let them reach Earth, the casualties will be measured in millions instead of thousands. The Admiral nodded slowly. Then, we'd better make it count. Send the orders. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. This is what we've been preparing for. Askasir's lading with please the Suntrament. Under Scrime, under Sane, across the solar system, human forces mobilized. Ships that had been disguised as mining vessels shed their camouflage and revealed weapon systems. Soldiers who had trained in secret for years checked their equipment one final time. Engineers worked around the clock to complete the last few vessels under construction. The Calvarian fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly on schedule. 300 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their shields glowing with contained energy, their weapons powered and ready. Fleet Commander Zalthorn watched from his flagship with satisfaction. This was how a proper military operation should look. Organized, overwhelming, and inevitable. Begin sensor sweeps, he ordered. Locate the human defensive positions around their homeworld. The sensor officer worked his controls, then frowned. Commander, we're detecting multiple contacts, but they're not near Earth. They're all around us. The tactical display suddenly filled with red icons. Human ships appeared from behind Jupiter's moons, from the asteroid belt, from positions hidden in the glare of the sun. They had been waiting in complete silence. Their engines cold, their systems passive, invisible to long-range scans. Impossible, Zalthorn whispered. How did they know where we would arrive? Aboard the UNS Defiance, Admiral Richards allowed herself a small smile. Because you're predictable, she said softly. Military minds think alike, even across species. She had studied every piece of data they had on Calvarian tactics. She had analyzed their ship designs, their formation preferences, their strategic doctrine. There were only 3 viable entry points into the solar system that gave good tactical positions while maintaining fleet cohesion. She had covered all 3 with hidden forces. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. Execute attack pattern Omega. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The human fleet surged forward at a speed that made Calvarian sensor officers cry out in alarm. Instead of maintaining safe engagement distances, the human ships accelerated directly toward the Calvarian formation at velocities that seemed suicidal. They're going to ram us! A Calvarian tactical officer shouted. Break formation, Zalthorn ordered, his calm cracking. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Prepare to engage with particle beams. The beautiful Calvarian formation shattered as ships scattered to avoid collision. The moment they lost cohesion, the human vessels split into small groups, each pack targeting isolated enemy ships. Jake Morrison piloted the UNS Retribution with Lisa Crawford, managing weapons beside him. Their target was a Calvarian heavy cruiser that had separated from the main fleet. The enemy ship was larger, better shielded, and carried weapons that could tear the Retribution apart at range. Jake had no intention of fighting at range. Shields taking hits, Lisa reported as purple energy beams lanced toward them. 70%, and dropping. Jake threw the Retribution into a corkscrewing dive that would have killed most pilots through sheer acceleration forces. Humans, evolved under higher gravity, barely noticed. The Calvarian gunners, trained to track predictable flight paths, couldn't keep up with his erratic movements. 2,000 meters, Lisa counted down. 1,500. 1,000. Weapons free, Jake ordered. At point-blank range, Lisa released a spread of kinetic kill vehicles. These weren't sophisticated energy weapons. They were simple tungsten slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails. Crude technology by galactic standards. But Calvarian shields were designed to disperse energy weapons, not stop solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The slugs punched through the shields like they weren't there and tore into the cruiser's hull. Atmosphere vented in explosive bursts. Secondary explosions rippled across the enemy ship's surface. Target destroyed, Lisa reported. Acquiring next target. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out. Human ships refused to fight at the distances where Calvarian technology dominated. Instead, they closed to ranges their enemies considered insane, using superior maneuverability and the ability to survive high acceleration turns to avoid incoming fire. Captain Henry Scott commanded the UNS Valkyrie, and he had a different strategy. He led 3 Calvarian destroyers on a chase through the debris field of a damaged station, then triggered pre-positioned mines his engineers had seeded throughout the area. The Calvarian ships, their sensors overwhelmed by the debris, didn't detect the mines until they detonated. 3 destroyers vanished in sequential fireballs. That's going to make them angry, his weapons officer, Lieutenant Amy Walsh, commented. Good, Henry replied. Angry enemies make mistakes. Fleet Commander Zalthorn watched his tactical display with growing horror. His fleet, which should have held overwhelming superiority, was being torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight according to any recognizable doctrine. Sir, we've lost 40 ships, his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. Enemy casualties are only 12 vessels. We need to fall back and reassess. Zalthorn's pride warred with reality. The Calvarian Empire had never retreated from a primitive species. But watching another 3 ships disappear from his display, he made a decision he never thought he would have to make. All ships, execute retreat pattern beta. fall back to Rally Point Gamma. But breaking contact with an enemy that moved faster and hit harder proved almost impossible. The human ships pursued like predators, chasing wounded prey, picking off damaged vessels and stragglers. Jake Morrison saw the Calvarian fleet trying to disengage and pressed his attack. "They're running. Don't let them regroup. Stay on them." A Calvarian frigate, its engines damaged and shields failing, tried to flee. Jake positioned the retribution behind it, and Lisa fired again. The frigate broke apart under the impact. Admiral Richards watched the battle from her command center and made a difficult decision. "All ships. Break pursuit. Let them go." "Admiral, we have them on the run," one of her officers protested. "And if we chase them into a trap, we lose everything we've gained," Richards replied. "We've won this engagement. Don't throw away victory by getting greedy." Reluctantly, the human ships broke off their pursuit. The Calvarian fleet, reduced from 300 ships to 237, jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled. In the aftermath, Admiral Richards surveyed the damage reports and casualty lists. 19 human ships destroyed. Over 2,000 crew members dead or missing. Every surviving ship showed damage. But they had won. Jake and Lisa docked with the Defiance and made their way to the command center. Admiral Richards looked exhausted, but determined. "We hurt them," Jake said. "Bad. They'll think twice before coming back." "They'll come back," Richards said. "We embarrassed them. Empires don't forgive embarrassment. Next time they'll bring more ships, better tactics, and they'll be prepared for our tricks." "So what do we do?" Lisa asked. Richards pulled up a star chart showing the route to Calvarian space. "We take the fight to them. We show them that attacking Earth has consequences. We're going to park our fleet on their doorstep and make them negotiate." "That's insane," one of the tactical officers said. "We can't threaten their entire empire with 70 ships. We don't need to threaten their empire," Richards replied. "We just need to make them afraid of what we might do. Fear is a powerful motivator." She turned to Jake and Lisa. "Get the fleet ready to move. We leave in 6 hours. I want to be at the Calvarian border before they finish licking their wounds." Completed B. As the command staff scrambled to prepare for the next phase, Jake looked at Lisa. "This is crazy. You know that?" "Completely crazy," Lisa agreed. "But it might just work. And if it doesn't, then we go down fighting," Lisa said with a shrug. "Better than surrendering," Jake laughed. "You know what the really scary part is? I think the Admiral is counting on that. She knows the Calvarians will do the math. Figure out that we can't actually defeat them, and realize that we're going to try anyway. And that's what's going to scare them. Because we're insane? Because we're human," Jake corrected. "And humans don't quit. Ever. The Calvarians can destroy us, but they can't make us surrender. And I think the Admiral is betting that they'll decide the Calvarian High Council chamber was in chaos." Holographic projections of council members from across the Empire filled the circular room. Their various forms united in shock and fury. Fleet Commander Zalthorn stood in the center, physically present and wishing he was anywhere else. 63 ships, Council Chair Mev Rain repeated for the third time. Her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of uncontested imperial authority. "You lost 63 ships to a species that barely controls its own moon. The humans employed tactics we have never encountered," Zalthorn explained, trying to keep his voice steady. "They ignored all standard engagement protocols. They weaponized their environment. They used crude kinetic weapons our shields were not designed to stop. And they showed a willingness to sustain casualties that borders on madness." "Madness or courage?" asked Corvan from his position at the edge of the chamber. The xenobiologist had been summoned to explain his warnings about Earth being a death world. "There is no difference," Counselor Vex Nar snapped. "Courage without wisdom is simply stupidity. We send a larger fleet, we adapt our tactics, and we crush them." 10-1 odds instead of 5-1. You still don't understand, Corvan said, his feathers rising in agitation. These are not just warriors. Every human is a potential warrior. Their entire species evolved in an environment where being peaceful meant being prey. Violence is not aberrant behavior for them. It's survival strategy, encoded into their very nature. Impossible, Vexnar scoffed. No species can sustain that level of aggression without destroying itself. Corvan pulled up images of human history. They nearly did. Multiple times. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They built enough nuclear devices to render their world uninhabitable for thousands of years. And they came within minutes of using them on several occasions. The council chamber fell silent as they absorbed this information. But they didn't, Mevrain observed quietly. Because at the last moment, they always chose survival over destruction, Corvan explained. They learned to redirect their aggression. Instead of fighting each other, they learned to fight their environment, their limitations, their own nature. And now we've given them a common external enemy. Us. The debate continued for hours, but it was interrupted by an urgent communication from the border defense stations. Council Chair, we have an emergency situation, the communications officer announced. The human fleet has arrived at our border. All 71 of their remaining vessels. Every council member froze. Someone pulled up a visual feed showing the human ships arranged in a loose formation just outside Calvarian space. At the center flew the UNS Defiance, Admiral Richard's flagship. They're attacking our territory? Mevrain asked in disbelief. No, Council Chair. They're just sitting there. And they sent this message. Text appeared on every council member's display. It was written in perfect Calvarian, which meant the humans had already broken their encryption and language systems. To the Calvarian Empire. You came to our home. You demanded our surrender. You attacked when we refused. Now, we're at your home. We're going to stay right here until you understand something important. Humanity does not surrender. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You want peace? You negotiate it as equals. You want war? We'll bring it to your doorstep and we won't leave until one of us is destroyed. Your choice. Admiral Patricia Richards, United Nations Space Command. Vexnar recovered first. They cannot seriously threaten our entire empire with 70 damaged ships, but the psychological impact was already spreading. Calvarian border worlds, which had existed in peace for centuries, suddenly found themselves on a potential front line. Merchant ships began avoiding the area. News spread across the Empire's communication networks. The invincible Calvarian military had been challenged at its own borders. Worse, word reached the 400 client species. Many of them had accepted Calvarian rule because resistance seemed futile. Now they watched as newcomers not only resisted, but took the fight directly to the Empire itself. On some worlds, resistance movements that had been dormant for decades began stirring. If humans could challenge the Empire, maybe they could too. Admiral Richards stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Calvarian border stations track her fleet. How long do you think we can maintain this position? She asked, Jake Morrison. Depends on what they do, Jake replied. If they attack, maybe a few hours before they overwhelm us. If they don't, as long as our supplies hold out. And how long is that? 6 months, Lisa Crawford answered. We rationed supplies for an extended deployment. Richards nodded. Then we wait. We make them decide if we're worth the cost of removing. The waiting was harder than the fighting. Every day, Calvarian ships appeared at the edge of sensor range, observed the human fleet, and departed without engaging. Every day, Admiral Richards sent the same message. Negotiate as equals, or face continued confrontation. Meanwhile, Corvan worked frantically to convince the High Council of the danger they faced. He compiled detailed reports showing the cost of conquering Earth. Even if we win, he presented to the council. We could lose thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. Every engagement will be brutal because humans don't surrender when defeated. They retreat, regroup, and counterattack. Pacifying Earth could take decades and cost resources we cannot spare. And while we're focused on one stubborn species, added another counselor who had studied the economic data, our control over 400 other worlds weakens. We're already seeing increased resistance movements. End quote. End quote. End quote. Some client species are demanding renegotiation of their agreements. Because we look weak, Vexnar argued. If we negotiate with these humans, every species in the Empire will think they can challenge us too. If we destroy ourselves fighting them, Korvan countered, we won't have an empire left to protect. The debate raged for days, while the human fleet sat at the border like a constant reminder of Calvarian failure. On Earth, the population waited nervously for news. The government had been honest about the situation. Their fleet was vastly outnumbered, sitting at the enemy's doorstep, gambling everything on the hope that the Empire valued stability more than pride. Ambassador Helen Price worked around the clock, preparing negotiating positions for every possible scenario. She knew that if the Calvarians agreed to talk, she would have one chance to secure peace. If she failed, the fleet would be destroyed, and Earth would face invasion. Back at the Calvarian border, a small diplomatic vessel approached the human fleet. Admiral Richards received the communication, with carefully hidden relief. This is Calvarian envoy ship Peaceful Dawn, requesting permission to come aboard your flagship for preliminary discussions. Permission granted, Richards replied. But know this, we're not discussing terms of surrender. We're discussing terms of peace between equals. The Calvarian envoy, a junior diplomat named Sevin, boarded the Defiance with obvious nervousness. He was young for a Calvarian, his feathers still showing juvenile coloring. Admiral Richards met him in the conference room with Jake and Lisa flanking her. The High Council has authorized me to begin exploratory talks, Sevin said formally. Though I must emphasize that the Empire's position has not changed. We still expect Earth's integration into our systems. And our position hasn't changed either, Richards replied. We will not be integrated, absorbed, or subjugated. We are a sovereign species, and we will be recognized as such. You realize you cannot win a prolonged conflict? Winning and surviving are two different things, Jake interjected. You might destroy us eventually, but the cost will be higher than any victory is worth. Every battle will be like the one at Jupiter. You'll win eventually, but you'll lose thousands of ships and millions of soldiers doing it. Sevin looked at the three humans with something approaching understanding. You would really rather die than submit? Every single one of us, Lisa said quietly. That's what you keep not understanding. This isn't about tactical calculation for us. This is about who we are. We're the species that survived 6 extinction events. We're the descendants of people who crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts to find new homes. We're the children of warriors who fought impossible odds because the alternative was slavery. Death is just another challenge to overcome. Sevin was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would change galactic history. What if there was another option? What if you could remain independent, but aligned with the Empire? A mutual defense treaty? Rather than subjugation? Admiral Richards leaned forward. Keep talking. The preliminary discussions lasted 3 days. Sevin reported back to the High Council, and the debates continued. Slowly, pragmatism began to overcome pride. Korvan provided the argument that finally shifted the balance. We have a choice, he told the Council. We can spend decades and countless lives conquering a single Deathworld species, or the neutral trading station called Haven's Gate orbited a gas giant in unclaimed space, far from both Earth and Calvarian territory. The Vesh Collective, an independent species known for their strict neutrality, operated the station as a meeting ground for diplomacy and trade. Their beetle-like forms scuttled through the corridors, ensuring everything was perfect for the historic negotiations. Ambassador Helen Price arrived on a shuttle from the human fleet, with Jake Morrison and Lisa Crawford as her military advisors. She had spent the 3-day journey reviewing every piece of intelligence they had on Calvarian culture, psychology, and negotiating tactics. "Remember," she told Jake and Lisa as they prepared to disembark, "we have leverage right now. We bloodied their nose in combat, and we're sitting on their border. But that leverage decreases every day we negotiate. They'll try to wait us out." "So we need to push for quick resolution?" Lisa asked. "No," Helen corrected. "We need to make them think we're comfortable with slow negotiations while actually pushing towards specific goals. It's a balance." The Calvarian delegation was already waiting in the main conference chamber. Ambassador Velroth led their team, looking considerably less confident than during their first meeting on Earth. Beside him stood Corvan and several council representatives, along with military advisors in elaborate armor. Helen entered the room without hesitation, choosing a seat at the circular table without waiting for invitation. Another small power play, establishing equality from the first moment. "Shall we begin?" she asked pleasantly. Velroth's feathers ruffled slightly. "The Empire is prepared to discuss terms for Earth's integration as an independent protectorate. You would maintain internal sovereignty while acknowledging the Empire's authority in external matters and contributing to collective defense." "No," Helen said simply. "You have not heard the full proposal." "I don't need to," Helen interrupted, echoing their first conversation. "Let me be absolutely clear about humanity's position. We will not be a client state, a protectorate, or a subsidiary of the Calvarian Empire in any form. We are a sovereign species, and we will be recognized as equals." One of the Calvarian counselors, an older member with silver-tipped feathers, spoke up. "Your species controls one star system. The Empire spans thousands. By what measure are we equals?" Jake leaned forward before Helen could respond. "By the measure that you're sitting at this table, instead of conquering us. If we were truly inferior, you would have destroyed our fleet at Jupiter and moved on to Earth. But you didn't. You're here because you ran the numbers and realized that the cost of subjugating us exceeds the benefit." The counselor's feathers flattened in anger, but Corvan spoke before the situation could escalate. "Perhaps we should focus on practical matters rather than philosophical debates about status. What does humanity want from these negotiations?" Helen activated a holographic display showing her prepared proposals. "Full diplomatic recognition as an independent, sovereign state. Trading rights equal to any other independent species in the galaxy. Access to galactic communication networks and navigational databases. And, most importantly, a mutual defense treaty." "Mutual defense?" Velroth repeated. "You want the Empire to defend Earth?" "No," Helen corrected. "We want to establish that attacking Earth means war with humanity, and attacking the Empire means war with Earth. We're not asking for protection. We're offering alliance." The Calvarian delegation exchanged glances. This was completely unprecedented. Client species didn't offer alliances. They accepted protection in exchange for submission. Why would the Empire want an alliance with such an aggressive, unpredictable species? Velroth asked carefully. Lisa Crawford answered, her voice cold and professional. "Because the galaxy is dangerous, Ambassador. You've controlled this sector for 3,000 years because you haven't faced serious opposition. That won't last forever. Somewhere out there is a species that can challenge you. When you meet them, do you want allies who know how to fight, or do you want to face them alone?" Corvan was nodding slowly. "She makes a valid point. Our military has grown comfortable fighting primitive species. We've forgotten how to adapt, how to innovate, how to fight enemies who don't follow expected patterns." "You want to weaponize them," the silver-feathered counselor said accusingly. "I want to learn from them," Corvan replied. "And I want to ensure they're pointing their weapons in the same direction as ours when real threats emerge." The negotiations continued for hours. The Calvarians wanted restrictions on human military expansion. Humanity wanted access to advanced technology and detailed star charts. Both sides wanted guarantees against future conflicts. Progress was slow. Every proposal from one side was met with counter-proposals from the other. Cultural differences created misunderstandings. Translation difficulties led to confusion. And underlying everything was mutual distrust born from their violent first contact. On the second day, Jake made a suggestion that changed the dynamic. What if we establish joint military exercises? Regular war games between Calvarian and human forces. We learn from each other, build trust, and develop combined operational capabilities. When the next crisis comes, and something always does, we'll be ready to face it together. The Calvarian military advisors leaned forward with interest. The prospect of studying human tactics in controlled conditions was valuable, and the humans would gain exposure to Calvarian technology and strategic doctrine. That could work, one of the Calvarian military commanders said. Structured exchanges, limited to specific systems, with observers from both sides. Helen saw the opening and pushed forward. We propose a pilot program. 6 months of joint exercises in neutral space. Both sides commit equal resources. At the end of the period, we evaluate the results and decide whether to continue. The negotiations took on new energy. If both sides could benefit from cooperation, the zero-sum mentality began to break down. They were no longer just negotiating to avoid war. They were negotiating to build something better. On the third day, they tackled the hardest issue: sovereignty and status. The Calvarians needed to maintain the appearance of imperial authority. Humanity needed recognition as equals. The two positions seemed irreconcilable. It was Ambassador Velroth who proposed the compromise. What if Earth is recognized as an independent sovereign state with full diplomatic standing, while also being designated as a strategic partner of the Empire? You maintain complete autonomy in internal matters and most external affairs. The Empire acknowledges your independence, while you acknowledge our role in maintaining galactic order. Helen considered it carefully. And what does strategic partner mean in practical terms? It means you're not subject to our laws, but you agree to consult with us on matters that might affect galactic stability. You maintain your own military, but coordinate with ours on mutual defense. You trade with whomever you wish but receive preferential access to Calvarian markets. So we're independent but aligned, Helen summarized. Exactly. You're not part of the Empire, but you're not opposed to it either. You're something new. A true ally, rather than a subject. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than they had hoped for. Helen took a moment to consider, then nodded. I think we can work with that framework. Let's hammer out the details. The next 2 days were spent defining exactly what the agreement meant. Technology transfers were negotiated. Trade agreements were drafted. Military cooperation protocols were established. Dispute resolution mechanisms were created. Throughout it all, both sides gradually learned to communicate more effectively. The Calvarians began to understand that human directness wasn't rudeness, but honesty. The humans learned that Calvarian formality wasn't arrogance but cultural necessity. On the 6th day, they had a draft treaty. Helen reviewed it one final time with Jake and Lisa. It's not everything we wanted, she admitted. We're limited in how far we can expand for the next 50 years. We have to share some technology with them. We're committed to defending them if they're attacked. But we're free, Jake said. We're recognized as independent and equal. We get access to galactic trade and technology. And we're not alone anymore. The question is whether Earth will accept it, Lisa added. Helen smiled. I think they will. We went to war to protect our freedom. This treaty guarantees that freedom, while opening the galaxy to us. That's a win. The signing ceremony was held on the 7th day. Representatives from both species gathered in Haven's Gate's largest chamber. Vesh collective observers recorded everything for Galactic Historical Archives. Ambassador Velrath and Ambassador Helen Price stood on opposite sides of a holographic display, showing the treaty text in both languages. On behalf of the Calvarian Empire, Velrath said formally, I acknowledge Earth and humanity as an independent, sovereign species, with full rights and protections under galactic law. We welcome you as strategic partners and allies. On behalf of Earth and humanity, Helen replied, I acknowledge the Calvarian Empire's role in maintaining galactic order. We accept the responsibilities and opportunities of our new status. We commit to working together for mutual benefit and collective security. They both placed their hands on the holographic display, authorizing the treaty. Across the galaxy, communication networks broadcast the news. The Calvarian Empire had recognized a new, independent species. For the first time in centuries, they had negotiated rather than conquered. As the ceremony concluded and delegations began departing, Velrath approached Helen privately. I must ask, Ambassador, was your species truly prepared to fight the entire Empire rather than surrender? Helen met his three-eyed gaze without hesitation. Every single one of us. That's what you never understood. You see our violence and aggression as problems to be managed, but they're what kept us alive on a world trying to kill us every day. We learned to fight because the alternative was extinction, and we learned to win because second place meant death. Your species frightens us, Velrath admitted quietly. Good, Helen said with a slight smile. Allies should respect each other's capabilities. It keeps everyone honest and prevents misunderstandings. And if we had refused to negotiate? If we had sent more ships to conquer you? Helen's smile faded. Then you would have learned exactly how expensive it is to fight a species that values freedom more than survival. We would have lost eventually, but we would have made you pay in blood for every meter of Earth you took. Velrath nodded slowly. I believe you. Perhaps that is why the Council should. The human fleet returned to Earth 3 weeks after the treaty signing. Admiral Richards had sent word ahead, but nothing prepared her for the reception. Every major city on the planet held celebrations. Millions of people gathered in streets and squares, cheering and waving flags representing the newly recognized sovereign Earth. The UNS Defiance descended through Earth's atmosphere toward the landing facility in Geneva, the same place where humanity's first meeting with the Calvarians had taken place. Jake Morrison sat in the co-pilot seat, watching the crowds below. They have no idea how close we came to losing everything, he said quietly to Lisa Crawford. They know enough, Lisa replied. They know we went to war to stay free. They know we won. That's all that matters to them. Admiral Richards stood behind them, looking tired but satisfied. We didn't win, Lieutenant. We survived. There's a difference. The Calvarians could have destroyed us if they were willing to pay the price. We just made the price too high. Isn't that what winning means? Jake asked. Richard smiled. I suppose it is. For humans, anyway. The ship landed, and the crew disembarked to thunderous applause. Government officials waited to greet them, along with families of the crew members who had survived. And standing at the front of the reception line was Ambassador Helen Price, who had returned 2 days earlier to begin briefing Earth's leaders on the treaty. Welcome home, Admiral, Helen said, shaking Richard's hand. The UN Security Council wants a full briefing tomorrow, but today is for celebrating. How are they taking the treaty terms? Richards asked. Better than expected. There are some complaints about the expansion restrictions, but most people understand that we got the best deal possible under the circumstances. We're free, we're recognized, and we're not alone in the galaxy anymore. That's more than anyone dared hope for 6 months ago. Over the next few weeks, Earth began adjusting to its new status. The treaty allowed for immediate technology transfers in certain areas. Calvarian scientists arrived to help humanity upgrade their communication systems to be compatible with galactic networks. Trade negotiations began with various species, and most importantly, plans were made for the first joint military exercises. Captain Henry Scott of the UNS Valkyrie was selected to lead the human contingent for the exercises. He spent his days reviewing Calvarian tactical data and preparing his crews for an entirely new kind of warfare. "It's going to be strange," he told Lieutenant Amy Walsh during a planning session. "Fighting alongside them, instead of against them. 6 months ago, we were trying to kill each other." "That's diplomacy," Amy replied. "Yesterday's enemy becomes today's ally. The question is whether we can trust them." Quote, "The Admiral says trust is built through shared experience. These exercises are designed to create that experience." Saddened. "Round. Round. The Admiral says Chrysley. Round. 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 The Admiral says Chrysley. Trust." The exercises were scheduled to take place in a neutral system designated solely for military training. Both sides would bring equal numbers of ships. They would run simulated battles against computer-controlled opponents, with mixed human Calvarian crews on some vessels. Corvan, the Calvarian xenobiologist who had warned his people about humanity's dangerous nature, volunteered to serve as a liaison officer aboard the UNS Valkyrie. He wanted to study humans up close, to understand the species that had changed galactic history. His first day aboard a human warship was educational. The gravity was uncomfortably high. The oxygen levels made him feel slightly dizzy, and the humans moved with a casual efficiency that spoke of constant physical training. "Your ship is smaller than comparable Calvarian vessels," Corvan observed to Captain Scott. "But you carry more weapons, and your crew is larger. We prefer having backup systems and extra hands," Henry explained. "Automation is efficient until something breaks. Then you need people who can fix it. And if your people are injured, then other people fix the ship while medical staff treats the wounded. We cross-train extensively. Most of my crew can perform at least 3 different jobs." Corvan was taking notes constantly. "Fascinating. The Empire tends toward specialization. Each crew member has a specific role. That works until you start taking casualties," Amy Walsh interjected. "In a real fight, people die. Ships get damaged. Systems fail. You need flexibility to survive." The first joint exercise was a disaster, but an informative one. The Calvarian ships tried to maintain formation, while the human vessels scattered and attacked from unexpected angles. Communication was confused. Coordination was impossible. The computer-controlled opponents defeated both forces easily. Commander Zal Thorne, who had led the failed attack on Earth and was now commanding the Calvarian exercise fleet, was frustrated. "Your ships refuse to maintain proper formation," he complained to Admiral Richards. "How are we supposed to coordinate when you keep breaking ranks? Your formations are too rigid," Richards countered. "You telegraph your intentions. Any competent enemy can predict your movements and counter them." They argued for hours before Corvan suggested a different approach. "What if we don't try to combine our tactics? What if we use them in sequence? Calvarian forces engage at range with formation discipline. When the enemy commits to countering that approach, human forces attack from unexpected angles. We support each other's strengths instead of compromising both." It took 3 more exercises before they got it right. But when they did, the results were impressive. The Calvarian ships would engage in a traditional formation battle, drawing enemy attention and resources. Then human ships would strike from flanking positions, exploiting the gaps in enemy formations. Zalthorn began to understand what the humans brought to an alliance. "You make us better," he admitted to Jake Morrison after a particularly successful simulation. "You force us to think beyond our established patterns." "You make us better too," Jake replied. "Your technology and discipline give us capabilities we never had. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone." While the military learned to work together, civilian contact expanded rapidly. Human traders began visiting Calvarian markets. Scientists exchanged information. Cultural delegations toured each other's worlds. Lisa Crawford volunteered for one such cultural exchange, spending a month on a Calvarian world. She returned with stories about architecture that defied gravity, food that changed color based on temperature, and people who were gradually learning that humans weren't the monsters their initial encounter had suggested. "They're still afraid of us," she told Jake over dinner, in the officers' mess. "But it's respectful fear now. They know we're dangerous, but they also know we're reliable." Several Calvarian officials told me they feel safer knowing humans are allied with them. "Because if we're scary to our friends, we must be terrifying to our enemies," Jake concluded. Exactly. 6 months after the treaty signing, the first crisis emerged to test the new alliance. A species called the Vraxin Collective began raiding Calvarian border worlds, hitting supply convoys and colonial outposts. The attacks were coordinated and effective, suggesting military organization rather than simple piracy. The Calvarian High Council debated how to respond. In the past, they would have sent overwhelming force to crush the raiders. But they had learned from their encounter with humanity. Overwhelming force against a determined enemy could be costly. Council Chair Mevrain made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. She contacted Earth and requested assistance. Admiral Richards received the message while inspecting the new shipyards humanity was building in orbit around Mars. The Calvarian technology transfers had accelerated human construction capabilities dramatically. "The Calvarians are asking for help," she told her senior staff. "Raider attacks on their border worlds. They want human ships and tactical expertise." "This is what allies do," Jake said. "They help each other." "It's also a test," Lisa added. "They're checking if we'll honor the treaty when it's not directly in our interest." Richards nodded. "Which is why we're going to respond immediately, and with everything we can spare. Get me a volunteer task force. 10 ships, our best crews. This is our chance to prove that humanity makes good on its promises." 2 weeks later, a combined human Calvarian fleet engaged Vraxin raiders in the Outer Rim territories. The Vraxin had expected a traditional Calvarian response: formation flying and particle beam exchanges at range. Instead, they faced Calvarian discipline, supported by human unpredictability. Captain Henry Scott commanded the human contingent, working in coordination with Zalthorn's Calvarian forces. When the Vraxin fleet formed their defensive line, the Calvarian ships engaged frontally while human vessels swept around the flanks. The Vraxin commanders, confused by tactics they had never encountered, tried to reposition. But adjusting to counter human mobility exposed them to Calvarian firepower. Adjusting to counter Calvarian weapons left them vulnerable to human kinetic strikes. The battle lasted 3 hours. The Vraxin fleet was destroyed with minimal Allied casualties. More importantly, other raider groups monitoring the engagement saw what happened to species that attacked Calvarian territory. The raids stopped within a month. The Vraxin Collective sent diplomatic envoys requesting negotiations rather than continuing military action. The message was clear. The Calvarian Empire now had allies who knew how to fight. Back on Earth, news of the successful joint military action was received with pride and relief. Humanity had proven itself not just as warriors defending their own world, but as reliable allies willing to fight for others. Ambassador Helen Price stood in the UN General Assembly, briefing the delegates on the state of Earth's galactic relations. 1 year ago, we faced potential subjugation or destruction. Today, we are recognized sovereign members of the galactic community, with growing trade relationships and proven military alliances. We have shown the galaxy that humanity can fight when necessary and build when possible. She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. But this is just the beginning. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension. There are thousands of species we haven't met, territories we haven't explored, challenges we haven't imagined. The treaty with the Calvarian Empire opened a door. Now we must decide what we do with that opportunity. Treat. What do you recommend, Ambassador? Asked the UN Secretary General. I recommend we do what humanity has always done, Helen replied. We explore, we learn, we adapt, we make friends where we can, and stand firm against threats. We prove that a species from a death world can be more than just warriors. We can be builders, teachers, explorers, and partners. And if we encounter hostile species? Helen smiled grimly. Then, we remind them why you don't start fights with apex predators. But we do it as part of an alliance, not alone. That's the real victory here. We're not isolated anymore. We have friends, partners, and allies. Together, we're stronger. Jake Morrison and Lisa Crawford watched the broadcast from the officers' lounge aboard the UNS Defiance. The ship was being refitted with hybrid human Calvarian technology, making it more capable than ever. Think we'll ever get to retire? Lisa asked. Probably not, Jake admitted. The galaxy just got a lot bigger and a lot more complicated. We're going to be needed for a long time. Good, Lisa said. I'd get bored with peace anyway. Jake laughed. That's the most human thing I've ever heard you say. On a Calvarian world halfway across the galaxy, Corvan published his comprehensive study of humanity. It became required reading for all Calvarian diplomatic and military personnel. The final paragraph summarized his conclusions. Humanity is dangerous, aggressive, and unpredictable by the standards of most civilized species. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly, and they learned to fight back with creativity, determination, and courage. But they are also capable of loyalty, cooperation, and remarkable adaptability. They make terrible enemies because they never surrender. But they make extraordinary allies for the same reason. The Calvarian Empire's greatest accomplishment may not be conquering 400 species, but befriending one species we could not conquer. When the next great threat emerges, and history suggests one will, we will face it with Earth's warriors standing beside us. I can think of no better insurance policy for our survival. Admiral Richards stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at Earth below. The blue-green planet that had seemed so vulnerable a year ago was now the center of a growing network of trade, diplomacy, and military cooperation. She thought about all the people who had died defending humanity's freedom. She thought about the risks they had taken and the gambles that had paid off. And she thought about the future, bright with possibility and fraught with unknown dangers. We did it, she whispered to the stars. We survived first contact. We earned our place in the galaxy. And we did it on our own terms. Behind her, the door opened and Jake entered. Admiral, we just received an interesting message from the Vesh Collective. They're inviting Earth to join the Neutral Worlds Coalition. Apparently, our performance in the treaty negotiations impressed them. Richard smiled. See? We're already making more friends. What's next on the schedule? Joint colony planning with the Calvarians. They want to establish a mixed settlement in neutral space, a place where both species can live and work together. Ambitious. I like it. Tell them we're interested. As Jake left to send the response, Richards returned her attention to the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and terrors humanity had never imagined, but they would face it all the same way they had faced the Calvarian Empire. Together, unafraid, and absolutely refusing to surrender. The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity among the stars had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Os wisdom over pride. As the Calvarian delegation departed, Helen joined Jake and Lisa for the journey back to the human fleet. We did it, Lisa said quietly. We actually did it. We survived first contact, Jake agreed. And we came out of it free and allied, instead of conquered or destroyed. I'd call that a win. Helen looked out at the stars through the shuttle's viewport. Somewhere out there was Earth, waiting for news. Somewhere out there was the rest of the galaxy, now open to humanity for the first time. This is just the beginning, she said. We've proven we can fight. Now we need to prove we can build, explore, and thrive. The galaxy is watching us. Let's show them what humanity can really do. E can gain them as allies who will stand with us when we face real threats. Because, eventually, we will encounter species more dangerous than humans. When that day comes, Wouldn't we rather have Earth's warriors fighting alongside us instead of against us? The council voted. It was close, but reason won over pride. Admiral Richards received the official communication while standing on the bridge, watching another day end at the border. The Calvarian Empire agrees to formal negotiations regarding a mutual defense and cooperation treaty. A full diplomatic delegation will arrive within 3 standard days. She allowed herself to smile for the first time in weeks. Signal the fleet. We're going to be here a while longer, but at least nobody's shooting. Contact Earth. Tell Ambassador Price to get out here. We have a peace to negotiate. The cost of destroying us is higher than the benefit. That's a pretty big bet. Yeah, Jake agreed. But it's the only one we've got. The human fleet began moving toward Calvarian space. 71 battered but unbroken ships, carrying the message that Earth would not bow to anyone. Behind them, they left a debris field and the wreckage of Calvarian pride. And ahead of them lay the most dangerous gamble humanity had ever taken. Parking a military fleet on the borders of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds and daring them to do something about it. Admiral Richards stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the stars streak past as they traveled through space. She thought about all the people who had died in the battle. All the families who would receive notification that their loved ones weren't coming home. She thought about the risk she was taking with the lives of everyone under her command. And she thought about the alternative. Earth as a subject world. Humanity as servants to an alien empire. Freedom traded for safety. No, she whispered to herself. Not today. Not ever. Humanity had 30 days. They had used 25 of them to prepare. Now they waited for the enemy to arrive, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether Earth remained free or became just another subject world in the Calvarian Empire. In orbit, Velroth's ship prepared to depart, carrying the ambassador back to Calvarian space to lead the conquest fleet personally. He looked at Earth one last time, confident that when he returned, it would be to accept humanity's surrender. He had no idea that he was about to learn the most expensive lesson in Calvarian history. Never start a war with a Deathworld species unless you're prepared to finish it. But deep in the intelligence section of his ship, a junior analyst named Corvan was reviewing the data they had collected on Earth. What he was reading made his feathers tremble with fear. The gravity of the planet was higher than standard. The atmosphere was corrosive. The weather patterns were catastrophic. The native predators were terrifying. Earth was a death world. And its inhabitants were apex predators. Corvan tried to send a warning to Velroth, but the ambassador was already planning his triumphant return with a conquest fleet. The report went unread. Humanity had 30 days to prepare. They intended to use every single one of them.